the Mawlid of the Prophet, peace be upon him, the celebration of the birthday of the Prophet, this is a festival, this is a festive occasion which Sunni Muslims have celebrated for over 1,000 years in every part of the Muslim world. In India, in Pakistan, in Egypt, and in Mecca, everywhere. And no scholar ever said it was haram. None whatsoever. Ibn Taymiyyah, who is a Hanbali, and one of the strictest of the Hanbalis, and one of the greatest of the Hanbalis, he himself in volume 23 of his fatwas talks about the Mawlid as a very good thing to do, and as a means of approaching God. Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyyah, who was his right-hand man, says even more beautiful things about the Mawlid. Ibn Kathir, who is also one of the disciples of Ibn Taymiyyah, and who wrote the great tafsir of Ibn Kathir, before he died, at the end of his life, wrote one of the most beautiful Mawlids. He wrote one of the most beautiful Mawlids. And he did it so that God would forgive him all of his sins, and so that he would certainly have paradise. And Ibn Kathir, Ibn Qayyim, Ibn Taymiyyah, these were men who knew the Quran and who knew the Hadith. And they knew that this is not only something good, this is one of the best acts that you can do to come close to God. The Prophet ﷺ celebrated his own Mawlid in Bukhari, which is Sahih Hadith, as you all know. In Bukhari, the Prophet is asked why he fasted on Monday. Because the Prophet, as you know, would fast on Mondays and Thursdays. And he encouraged us to fast on Mondays and Thursdays. And the Prophet was asked, why do you fast on Monday? And he said, because I was born on that day. The Prophet fasted, which is an act of worship, on Monday in gratitude and thankfulness and celebration that Allah gave him birth. And this is one of the hadith that the scholars who have taught the Mawlid for over 1,000 years have always told us. It's one of the dalils. It's one of the many proofs of the Mawlid. No Hanafi scholar, no Maliki scholar, no Shafi'i scholar, no Hanbali scholar in 1,000 years ever said anything about the Mawlid but that it is one of the greatest things that we do. But one thing they would say is that you should not do it only once a year. You should not limit it to the 12th of Rabi' al-Awwal. But you should do it all the time. And the whole of creation takes joy in the birthday of the Prophet. In Bukhari, in Sahih Bukhari, in Kitab al-Nikah, in the book of marriage, the Prophet tells us that Abu Lahab, his uncle, who opposed him and who hated him, his uncle Abu Lahab, and who went to hell, Tabbat yada Abi Lahab wa tab, that Abu Lahab, on every day that is like a Monday, God lessens the punishment of Abu Lahab. Why? Abu Lahab is in hell. He is in the worst of punishment. But on every day like a Monday, God makes the punishment of Abu Lahab less severe. Why? Because on the day the Prophet was born, which was a Monday, Abu Lahab was, everybody knew that Amina, the blessed mother of the Prophet, is having a miraculous child. Everyone in creation knew that. We have many hadith about that. The seerah tells us about that. You know, this is not something unknown. And Abu Lahab knew that Amina has a great light. And he knew that this boy she is going to have will be very special. And we know from the seerah and from hadith that Abu Lahab believed that this boy, when he's born, he would be Abu Lahab's supporter. And he would make Abu Lahab and his whole cult of idolatry rule over all the Arabs. And when the news came to him of the Prophet Muhammad's birth on a Monday, the slave girl, Thawbiyah, who brought to him that news, he was so happy that he freed her. And in the hadith in Bukhari, the Prophet says, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, that God makes every day that is like a Monday go easier for Abu Lahab because he freed Thawbiyah on the Monday because of the birth of the Prophet. This Ibn Abbas, Al-Abbas, the Prophet's, another of the Prophet's uncles, like Abu Lahab, like Hamza. Al-Abbas wrote poetry about the Prophet's birth. Al-Abbas is one of the sources of how we know what happened, when the Prophet was born. This is again in the Sahih. This is not something that you make up. Al-Abbas had poetry about the Prophet's Mawlid, and he would recite it to the Prophet, and the Prophet loved that. Aisha, the wife of the Prophet, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, the beautiful one, Aisha al-Humayra, the fair lady, she memorized all the poetry of Hassan bin Thabit and all the different poets that was about the ta'zeem of the Prophet, the greatness of the Prophet, the glorification of the Prophet, the birthday of the Prophet, and she would recite it to the Prophet, and he loved it. So where are these teachings coming from? Who is saying this? These are not Sunnis. And I know that this will offend them deeply, but it is the truth and it has to be said. They have an innovation. They are people of innovation. They are not Hanafis, they are not Malikis, they are not Shafi'is, they are not Hanbalis. And many of them are very sincere. And I know them very well. I taught them for 26 years. So what are you going to tell me? I know them better than they know themselves. Most of them are new Muslims. Most of them are reverts. Most of them are people who don't know the deen at all. But they read a hadith and then they go tell people this is bid'ah, this is bid'ah, this is haram. They never study the scholars. They have no ijazah. They have no idhn. They don't know Arabic. They don't know usul al-fiqh. So those among them who are sincere, they need to learn the truth. And stop dividing our communities. And stop destroying our communities. And begin to do good, and begin to build, and be humble. Learn to know how much you know and how much you don't know. And then, inshallah, Allah will bless us. But the Mawlid is a very great thing. And our scholars have consensus on that. Ijma' is one of the proofs of this religion. We have proofs in Quran, we have proofs in Hadith, we have proofs in the Seerah, we have 1,000 years of history, and not a single Imam ever said this was haram. And the same thing with the ta'zeem. The whole creation stands up in the ta'zeem of the Prophet. If the Prophet were to walk, if the Prophet were to walk in this room, you wouldn't stand up to greet him? This is not shirk, this is not worship, this is just feeling the greatness of this man who was the greatest human being who ever lived and who ever existed. So, there is a lot to say about that. But the Mawlid, technically speaking, is a type of dhikr. It is a type of dhikr. It is a dhikr in which we mention the birth of the Prophet because his birth is such a great event. It is one of the cosmic events of creation. He himself celebrated it. He himself celebrated every week, every Monday, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And any dhikr that mentions the birth of a prophet is called a Mawlid. Surah Maryam is a Mawlid. Surah Ali Imran is a Mawlid. They tell us about the birth of Jesus. They tell us about the miracles of the birth of Jesus. They tell us about the birth of Mary. They tell us about Zechariah and the birth of John the Baptist. These are amazing things. Allah put signs in the birth of the Prophet. They tell us the Mawlid of Moses. And they tell us how when Moses was being born, Pharaoh went out to get all the children of Israel and to put them to death because he knew from the astrologers and from prophecies that this boy would destroy him and take his kingdom. You know that story. And then the mother of Moses, God be pleased with her. She said, oh God, how can I protect this little baby? He said, I can't do anything. I can't protect him. So she wrapped him in a blanket of the children of Israel. And she put him in a basket, a taboo. And she put the basket in the Nile River where there are crocodiles. Huge crocodiles. And she pushed it out to the sea among the crocodiles. And then it goes down the Nile River and it comes right to the house of Pharaoh. Right? What a miracle. What a tahaddi. And then Pharaoh sees, Pharaoh sees, this is an issue of war. And maybe he's the one. He's right here. And Asiya, who is his wife and who is a perfect woman, according to the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, Asiya, she says, don't worry. Maybe he will come. He's just a baby. He just came to us. But even then, Pharaoh knows that I will be destroyed by this war. And then Pharaoh takes a coal, a hot burning coal, and he puts it near Moses, and Moses picks up the cool end of it, and it's like candy, and he puts it in his mouth, and he burns his tongue, and he begins to cry. And he says, oh, he's not the one. Because if he were a prophet, he wouldn't have done that. In reality, because he was a prophet, he did that, so that Pharaoh would not know for sure. And for that reason, Moses could never speak like his beloved brother Aaron. Because Aaron never burned his tongue. If you burned your tongue with a burning coal, you'd be lucky to be able to say a single word. But Moses could speak, but he couldn't speak like Aaron, because his tongue had been wounded as a little baby. So there is tremendous good in these things. You know, the Prophet says, لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى أكون أحب إليه من ولده ووالده والناس أجمعين. The Prophet said, none of you believe until I am more beloved to you than your children, than your mother and your father. And who is more dear to me than my children and my mother and my father? But none of you believe until you love me more than you love your children and your mother and your father and all human beings. All human beings. This is in Bukhari and Muslim. And the whole purpose of the Mawlid, as it developed in Islamic history over more than 1,000 years, was to instill the love of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam in us and in our children. And wallahi al-azim, I bear witness by God, the creator of the heavens and the earth, that the reason why you, who are unique people and who are a lesson to us in America, the reason why you are here in Guyana under the most difficult circumstances and doing very well after 165 years of oppression in many cases is because you stood in ta'zeem of the Prophet, and because you did the Mawlid, and because you held to the madhab of Abu Hanifa, which is a Sunni madhab. The Sunnis are those who believe in Abu Hanifa, those who believe in Imam Malik, those who believe in al-Shafi'i, and those who follow Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. Follow any of them you want. You want to follow Hadith, you want to do that very carefully, follow Imam ibn Ahmad. Follow Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. Follow Ibn Taymiyyah. Ibn Taymiyyah is a great Imam, but you follow him. Don't follow your whims. And you will see that they have none of this nonsense. None of this nonsense whatsoever. But you cannot take this deen on your own without knowledge, without an imam, without ijazah, because you don't know. You think you know what the hadith means? There are thousands of hadith, my dear brother. You think you know what the Quran means? Do you know Arabic? Do you know usul al-fiqh? Be humble. Be God's servant. And don't create trouble in our community.
दास्तां हर दिल की सुन लो, या नबी महफिल की सुन लो, इल्तिजा साइल की सुन लो, अकबरे बिस्मिल की सुन लो, या नबी सलाम अलैका, या रसूल सलाम अलैका, या हबीब सलाम अलैका, सलवातुल्लाह अलैका, या नबी सलाम अलैका, या रसूल सलाम अलैका. या नबी सलाम अलैका, या रसूल सलाम अलैका, या हबीब सलाम अलैका, सल्लल्लाहु अलैका।
अल्लाहुम्मा सल्लि अला सय्यिदिना मुहम्मद व अला आलि सय्यिदिना मुहम्मद व बारिक वसल्लिम।